Aiboan, Vanakkam, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good evening. Welcome to the AmCham Sri Lanka Modern Workplace Series. Today, on this exciting series where we aim to learn the latest and evolving trends, tips and tricks to increase productivity, as well as to disrupt the paradigm and think out of the box, we are talking on a very transformative topic, data analytics, and more so, data analytics for exponential growth. Now, last month, we had Dr. Rasika Wickramasinghe, who leads business development for the APAC region at Stacks Inc., provide us with an insight on organizational ambidexterity, or as I called it, corporate yoga, with a view to sustainably growing your business. Today, we have a few more stars from the Stacks team here to talk to us about analyzing data and how it benefits all our systems and processes. As you know, usually the Modern Workplace series is one where we have a one-on-one, well, can I even say that on a webinar of over 200 people? But anyway, usually it's one expert LQA. But today, given the importance, the scope, and the various takes on this topic, we have a team of data analysis specialists here to give us some key learnings. Without further ado, Randika Rodrigo, Manager Data Analytics, has over 7 years of industry experience and has worked with both local and international clients in FMCG, banking, retail, and restaurant industries to deliver data-driven insights and digital solutions. He has worked on projects focusing on optimizing customer value, improving operational efficiency, and market expansion through data analytics, and also works with clients to model sophisticated business processes to improve their predictive capabilities and reduce inefficiencies in their operations. Before joining Stacks, Randika worked as a business analyst at Codis, a healthcare finance company based in Washington, D.C., where he developed proprietary algorithms to detect errors in healthcare billing and to automate manual processes. Joining him today, Stefan Jara, consultant data analytics. Stefan manages complex data projects, which often involve leveraging the Python programming language and statistical techniques to extract insights from large data sets, as well as building systems to automate and visualize analyses. For the private equities that Stacks serves, he has predominantly worked on engagements involving companies in the software as a service and technology segments. Now, prior to joining Stacks, Stefan co-founded and served as a digital strategist of Litmus, a Sri Lankan digital marketing agency. He handles strategizing, content creation, and multi-channel online campaigns, and focused on A/B texting, performance marketing, search engine optimization, and web development. Also on the Stacks team, presenting to you today, senior consultant for the data analytics team at Stacks and lead of the R&D function, Pasindhu Abevira. Pasindhu's work spans global clients in multiple industries such as banking and finance, information security, healthcare, FMCG, and technology. At Stacks, Pasindhu's focus is on innovation in strategic decision-making and business optimization using data. His work includes customer process optimization with advanced analytics, market modeling using natural language processing and big data, and application development to augment decision-making with data. Before joining Stacks, Pasindhu co-founded and led the analytics team for Jellyfish Salon, working in business optimization and digital marketing. And he worked as a quantitative analyst for CAL, where he simulated Sri Lanka's economy for market insights. He started his career at Information Security Advisory Practice of PwC in the USA. Gentlemen, welcome to the AmCham Sri Lanka Modern Workplace series. It's a pleasure to host you this evening. And the floor is all yours. So over to you for what is sure to be an interesting and insightful session.
Thanks, Rai.
Hey, thanks, Rai. Thanks for the nice introductions. Hey, good evening, everyone. It's great to see a lot of people joining in on this call, on this webinar, right? And thanks for taking the time off from your busy schedules to come listen us talk about how you guys can sort of use data to accelerate growth in your own companies, right? So before we start with the presentation, I want to give a small introduction to Stacks and where we are coming from. Just give me 1 second. Charu, can you give me access control?
I have. You can control it now.
Oh, here you go. Yeah. So first of all, guys, I think I just want to give a brief introduction to where we are coming from, right? So we work at Stacks Stax is a global consulting firm that was founded in the US about 25 years ago. And our heritage is really supporting some of the biggest private equity companies chasing value, right? So be it in the acquisition stage where we help them understand how good a potential company is, or post-acquisition when we really sort of help them really with their growth initiatives, right? So in summary, we help some of the largest private funds effectively allocate capital to maximize their value of their investments across the deal life cycle, right? And we've been doing it for more than 25 years, right? And what I want to really talk about is and emphasize about is the approach that we take to do all of this, right? So we take a very data-centric approach where we bring in all kinds of data, right? The market data, market indicators, data coming from surveys, data coming from social insights, and we sort of marry those data points with our internal data about the company, right? And by doing so, we are able to sort of put together a very comprehensive fact base that allows us to answer key questions that are relevant to our stakeholders and our clients, right? So we've been doing this for more than 25 years for some of the biggest companies in the world, right? And during this talk, what we really want to talk about is we first want to give you guys a sense of what data can do to your organization, how you guys can look at data as a lever of growth, right? And talk about some of the challenges that you might have to sort of face when you embark on this journey, right? And once that is done, Stefan will take over and Stefan will talk about how we at Stax approach problems like this when we help our clients, right? And after that, Pasinda will come in and talk about a real world example of how we recently helped a company to start on this journey, right? So hopefully we can make this interesting. Hopefully we can make this relevant to all parties who are attending this webinar today. So all of you guys are interested in knowing more about data, and there's a lot of discussions around different aspects of data. There's a lot of talk about machine learning, a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, a lot of talk about deep learning. People are interested, business leaders are interested in understanding how machine learning, artificial intelligence can be used in their businesses, right? However, data is not anything new, right? If you are coming from a mid-sized to a large company, you would have had systems like ERPs, CRMs, HCMs for the past 15, 20 years, right? However, back then, people didn't really think about the value of data. Those systems did functional things, right? So it helped the marketing team do a better job at marketing, but that's about it, right? So as of lately, however, people have realized that by putting data together across the organization, that you are able to get more value out of data. People are talking about seeing data as the new electricity, right? People are talking about seeing data as a lever for growth, right? So let's just take a moment to think about how it can be done, right? So in any business, right, if you think about what you want to do, all businesses have the same objectives, right? You want to expand into profitable markets, you want to attract high value customers, you want to enhance their value, and you want to do all of this with the least amount of cost, right? So that's what every business wants to do, right? And what data allows to do is really, it allows you to paint a picture about the different components of your business in lot of detail that allows you to identify what's working and what's not working, right? So within markets, right, how can you segment the markets in a way where you can identify the high growth markets from the low growth markets, right? How do you identify your high potential customers, high value customers from your low value customers, right? How can you really think about your operations and figure out what parts of your operations are working pretty well and what parts require your attention, right? So what data allows you to do is data allows you to have a holistic, comprehensive view of your organization so that you are able to make these decisions on the go, right? However, as you would know, even though people are interested in this, most of the time business leaders haven't really bought into this whole ongoing on this journey, right? And there are various reasons to this, right? So one of the reasons being, most of the time business leaders think that that it requires a major investment, right? Data projects require major investment, and no monetary benefits can be reaped within a short period of time, right? And this used to be the case back in the day, but with all these different technologies coming into play over the last 10 years, there has been huge improvements and therefore cost reductions in data collection, data management, and insight creation, right? And the time to insights, right? The time to create insights have drastically reduced, right? So you don't have to now rely on expensive software like SaaS. There are so many free or semi-free options, which allows you to really get going with data without having to spend a lot of time, energy, and money, right? Another sort of a myth is that people think that, okay, if we are to sort of create access to data across the organization, get everyone sort of going with data within organization, then you are inviting security risks, right? So it's a very it's a concern for most companies, right? But at the same time, again, the recent developments in technology, especially the cloud technologies, allows you to store your data a lot more securely, right? So all these typical cloud services like AWS, Azure, they all carry world-class security protocols that can keep your data safe without exposing it to outsiders, right? On top of that, what you can do is you can create a governance policy within your organization to really remove sensitive information from your data sets that are being shared, right? So therefore, you can really keep your data secure as well. And lastly, people also think that to go on this journey, to embark on this journey, that you need to have a full-on team of data scientists, right? Again, this is not the case, right? I think you can always start internally, right? Within the organization, finding people who knows about your data, getting them to really think about and help you organize your data, right? How do you separate the bad data from the good data? And how do you identify that 20% of the data that gives you 80% of the value, right? So once you've done that, then you can bring in experts, right? So you can bring in experts to create infrastructure that will allow you to sort of keep the data organized, right? And therefore make it accessible to the business leaders of the organization, right? So I think first thing is to really the need to think about data in a little bit different way, right? But at the same time, there are certain other problems and challenges businesses have to go through as well, right? And guys, if you guys have any questions, you guys are I think you guys can use the Q&A function to post your question. And at the end of the session, we can sort of answer them as well. So like I said, you first have to work with the mindset change, right? But at the same time, there are certain technical process-related issues that are keeping companies from using data. And again, the reason for this is that historically, businesses and business leaders didn't really pay attention to data, right? They didn't really think about the best way to sort of organize the data. They didn't really think about the best way to sort of store the data, right? So data lived in silos, right? In different systems, right? And most of the time, the business users, what they would do is they would just get a data dump and they would do a lot of enrichment on top of it, and typically on Excel, right? So this could be sort of the segmentation work that you do in Excel, or like it could be like a what if sort of an analysis you do, right? But all the analysis and all the enrichment work stays within that Excel, right? It doesn't get pushed back into a system, right? Which means that all that business logic, all that business nuances, all that business information is just kept in one document, just within one team, right? And this is really what inhibits the data usage across the organization, right? So when you start on this journey, I think you need to build enough infrastructure in the right way to be able to store and organize data and give accessibility, create accessibility across the organization, right? So that business users can sort of start using different parts of data, different attributes, and they can build on business logic that will really create more value, put more color around the different aspects of data, right? So that's a very crucial thing that any company has to do when they start on this journey, right? Again, I think it's easy to get confused because a lot of the time business users don't really understand some of the data or the technical jargon, right? So they hear things like artificial intelligence, they hear things like machine learning, and they are automatically interested in understanding how artificial intelligence can increase their sales by 30%, right? And it doesn't work like that, right? You have to start small, right? You have to first start with the descriptive analysis, right? You need to figure out what has happened in the past, right? And then you can put a little bit more color around that, right? Bring in a little bit more additional data, more granular data to be able to sort of drill down to those specific segments, products, where you are seeing these different trends, to be able to explain why you are seeing the trends you are seeing, right? And then what you can do is you can further build on top of this, right? You can increase the sophistication of the analysis you are doing, right? Using different techniques, and which would allow you to sort of get a good sense of what the future is going to be based on your past historical patterns, right? Now, the value that you get out of your insights become a lot more impactful to the business, right? You can keep on adding this, right? You can continue on this journey and you can bring in the business inputs that are related to your performances, right? So that within these sort of data models, it will basically create these relationships that are important to your performance metrics, right? So to give you an example, if you are mature to this stage, then you'd be able to know that in the next quarter, I'm expecting a dip in sales within these specific regions, right? So that's the forecasting predictive part. With that knowledge, you can also know that, okay, discounts and credit periods are really correlated with my performance, right? My sales, right? So by increasing sales by increasing discounts by 5% and extending my credit periods to, let's say, 60 days, I am able to sort of counteract the predicted shortfall in my sales within that specific region, right? So you become your data will start telling stories, and it will be guiding your organization in a lot more objective way than how it used to be, right? So Jaro, Stefan will also talk about a little bit about this framework when he talks about when he talks in the next section. Another thing, one of the most important things that we want to sort of emphasize, yeah, here we go. Is that you need to embrace data as a culture within your organization, right? So it can't be just the C-level that is using data. It can't be just the management that is using data. Across your entire organization, people should be using data, right? And typically, a lot of these data points are generated at the operational levels, right? Be it from the finance system, or from the, let's say, the CRM system, or from the ERP systems, right? And all of this data has to sort of go through, like, funnel up uh, across the organization to the more senior management people, right? And at each step, it's very important that this data gets enriched, right? The managers need to figure out, okay, what's real and what's not real, right? What can we sort of eliminate? What can we really keep? How can we bring in additional information to provide a lot more context, right? So an example would be a sales manager bringing in some market indicators to explain some of the recent sales trends, right? So you can really get a better picture of what your data is telling, in the context of the larger business operations, right? And this data then needs to sort of funnel again towards the senior management, the C-level and the board people, so that they have a full holistic understanding of what the business, what's happening in the business, right? And this is when you really start seeing changes, right? Your decisions will be a lot more data oriented, right? Data driven, yeah. And they'll be a lot less dependent on opinions and personal experience and anecdotal evidences, right? And the time to insights or the time to take a decision will drastically reduce, right? And therefore time to action will drastically reduce as well, right? And especially when you want to take your company through a growth journey, you have to take some risky bets, right? You have to figure out the right strategies to attract the right customers, right? And what data will provide you is a constant monitoring of how you are doing, right? So if you are not executing the right strategy, right, your data will inform you of that, right? So then what you can do is you can correct for that, right? So this whole thinking about using data as a sort of a way to think about your business is what will really unleash its full potential, right? So that's the end of my section, and off to Jaro, who will take you through how Stacks looks at data and how we sort of go about solving for this.
Thanks, Randika. Can you quickly let me know if you're seeing only the slide or if you're seeing the presenter view?
Yeah, I'm only seeing the slide.
Okay, fantastic.
So,
hey, everyone. Hope you're doing good and staying safe. So in this portion of the webinar, I'll be covering how we at Stacks approach data analytics. We like to think of it as a philosophy of data analytics. Often in conversations about data, and Randika mentioned this as well, the discussion is it's derailed towards tools, technologies, programming languages, algorithms, and whatnot. And because this tends to be the glamorous side of data analytics, to be able to say, I'm using a cutting edge algorithm or machine learning or artificial intelligence. But see, technology plays a supporting role. It should serve a much bigger purpose. The worst investments are those that are made purely for bragging rights, just to be able to say, at my company, we use state-of-the-art technology. And what's that state-of-the-art technology doing? Nothing but taking up server space most of the time. So what we propose doing is focusing on the business problems to be solved, especially at the early stages when you're thinking about how you or your company can become more data-driven. Everything else is secondary to intimately understanding those business problems. So let's simplify running a business for a second here. The purpose of every business is to create value and obviously profit from that value. And there are only two ways that you can do that. You can maximize your revenue or you can minimize your costs. And theoretically, it's that simple. Everything that you do in your organization, sales and marketing, financial planning, recruitment and training, adopting a new technology, all of this is done in pursuit of either one or both primary objectives, maximizing revenue and minimizing costs. So then what's data-driven value creation? Very simply, it's using data to drive and guide these actions. It's making sure that you consider the patterns, the stories, and the insights in your data before you make a decision. And this doesn't come easy, especially to organizations that aren't data-driven. Often people don't realize that there are 4 pillars or 4 necessities for creating value using data. The first and the most important thing is having a data mindset. Do you understand your problem well enough? Do you understand what data can help you resolve this problem? Do you know what hypotheses need to be tested? And once you've run your analyses and performed your experiments, do you know how to turn those insights into recommendations and plans of action that will resolve the problem you were first thinking of? So linking everything to a business problem is a key characteristic of a data-driven organization. The second most important thing, and perhaps the most obvious thing, is the data itself. Do you have data that's relevant to the problem that you want to solve? Is that data comprehensive? Is that data clean and complete? Are there any gaps that need to be filled in with external data sets? You could have the greatest analysts on your payroll, but the quality of your data will define their success. The third pillar is an analytical skill set. What do you want to get out of your data? Do you want it to tell you why something happened? Do you want it to tell you what you need to do? Do you want it to tell you what could happen if you did something? This needs to be very, very closely linked, once again, to the problem that you're trying to solve. And finally, and to some of you, this may be the juicy part, it's the efficient tool set. And the key word here for all of us is efficient. So not using technologies for the sake of using technologies, but using the tool or the algorithm or the machine learning model or the dashboard that solves the problem at hand. And all these pillars are equally important, but we call them pillars for a reason, because they need to support value creation. Now, I've been talking so much about the characteristics data-driven organizations must possess. So I also want to cover how you could go about doing that with relation to everything that I've said about mindset, about data set, skill set, and tool set. The first step is reflection. Where do you and where does your company currently stand in its journey to become more data-driven? In every aspect of this journey, how mature is your organization? How mature is your organization in understanding its most pressing needs? How mature is data as an asset within your organization? How mature is your organization's capabilities to make sense of this data? And finally, how mature is your organization's, and especially your leadership's, ability to make decisions informed by these insights? And once you know where you stand at the moment, how mature you are in each of these 4 domains, you can then begin figuring out where to go. You just need to know where you stand at the moment. So let's start with the maturity of needs. At the moment, there is an infinite number of things you could do right now to create greater value, each with varying degrees of success. But you don't have infinite time, and neither do you have an infinite budget. And if you do have an infinite budget, please reach out to Stacks. So in that case, what do you do when you don't have an infinite amount of time and an infinite budget? And this is a really, really tough question to answer, because there's just so much to consider. There's the customer facing side of your business, the market expansion side of your business, the operational side of your business. And then to make it even more complex, you have sub areas within each of these areas to consider. And for a recent project that we ran, we had this exact same problem. We spoke to more than 50 directors, managers, vice presidents, and leaders across a large manufacturing organization in the US to find out what kinds of insights they needed to perform better in their roles. And as we had more of these conversations, we started seeing patterns in their needs. And eventually, of the 50 requirements that had been communicated to us, a small subset accounted for the greatest potential immediate impact across the organization. And that was our eureka moment. Those were the pressing business needs that would have an outsized impact on the organization. And so we rolled out our value creation framework. We rolled out our value creation framework, pulling out our playbook and picking and choosing the right analyses to address these business needs. Supported, of course, by our Analytics Edge platform, which is our repository of proprietary, purpose-built tools and knowledge of popular technologies. So the key takeaway here is identify your most pressing business needs, and then let that define the analyses that you need to run, the work that you need to do. Start with the end in mind. A lot of companies are currently sitting on a wealth of data. It's really everywhere. It's on your website, it's on your social media, it's within all of the systems that you use, it's spread across your computers in Excel files and in Word documents. And there's probably some of it in your cupboards as well. And that's just internal data. And there's also a wealth of information available online, often freely accessible, that can be easily extracted and analyzed. But with that being said, right now, the data is disparate. It's there, but it's all over the place. It's got holes and accuracy issues. It's in formats that you can't easily analyze, like an unstructured document. And if you were to run an analysis on these bits and pieces of data that you have, that would result in a garbage in is garbage out kind of situation. So how do you prevent that? You prevent it by enriching your data. And there are various ways that you can do that. The first thing is integrating your data. And integration really is a fancy word for putting everything together, right? It's a simple concept, but there's complication in the nuances. If you have data that has historically existed in separate systems and has historically been analyzed separately, then stitching them together can be quite time consuming. They might not be really made to fit, but the investment would be worth the trouble because it would unlock a comprehensive view of your organization that you probably don't have right now. You don't have a holistic view, right? Because you probably only have a departmental view or a functional view because each of these departments or functions have their own systems. And it's so difficult to have one single kind of 360 view of the organization using data from a central place. The second is layering in your external data with your internal data. A lot of people are sleeping on the value of external data sets. These may be market size or market growth percentages that you can use to compare against the growth of your categories or your product lines. These may also be what your customers are saying about each of your products or your outlets or your branches online. And then you can compare that to what they're saying about your competitors. And finally, you could uncover the reasons behind why you've been seeing increasing customer churn. And all of this is possible with data that exists online, the chatter about your business and the chatter about your products. The third enrichment method is structuring. There's only value in data if, sorry about that, there's only value in data if it can be analyzed. And with modern technology, you can turn a lot of things into analyzable data sets. Once again, if I was to use the customer reviews example, these are unstructured free-form statements. But a tool that we have called Social Sense can classify them into themes. So you can cut through the clutter and you can focus on the most important topics. Similarly, you could use robotics process automation, which has become another buzzword in the data space. You can use RPA to extract specific data from scanned documents and store them in an Excel file or a database, so it becomes far more analyzable. The fourth enrichment method is something that's often overlooked. It's transforming your data in various ways. It's cleaning things to make sure that things are standardized. It's filtering out irrelevant data points, perhaps things that are irrelevant to the problem that you want to solve. It's filling in gaps by pulling in stakeholders that may know the answers and turning it into the right structure or the right format so that it can be easily plugged into a dashboard or a machine learning model. And then in the end, after all of these enrichment mechanisms or enrichment processes, what you have is an enriched data set, a very holistic fact base that contains a comprehensive internal view of your organization, an outside in view or an external view of your organization, and it's all ready to be plugged into a model, it's all ready to be visualized, and it's all ready to be analyzed. So you're no stranger to this framework by now. My colleague Randika was just speaking about the analytical journey. But the types of questions that you currently regularly ask from your data is a good indicator of your organization's insight maturity. This is the foundational question. What happened, right? How much business did my sales team bring in last year? How much did they farm out of existing accounts? How many customers did we win and how many customers did we lose? And then we move on to an investigative question. Why did anything happen? Why did all these things happen? What explained the drop in our sales performance? Did we focus too much on smaller clients than larger contracts? Are there a lot of things currently in our pipeline that haven't been converted? Did we lose a key member of the sales team who took many large accounts with them? And so far with these two, we've covered the exploratory questions. And now we're going to move on to the harder questions because they're more targeted and they generally involve a lot more variables, right? The first type of advanced question is predictive. So once again, as Randika mentioned, what's going to happen? Based on how we've been performing, to continue with the same example, based on how we've been performing up until this point and based on our data of seasonal demand, what are next quarter's sales figures going to be like? What would happen if we did something a bit different? If we focused on these XYZ product lines than these ABC product lines? How would that change our predicted performance? What would happen if we prioritize, certain markets or customer segments over others? We're using our data with these questions to play out scenarios in the future so we can decide which scenario is optimal to pursue. The second and perhaps most advanced question is, what should we do? Given that we've fed very rich data on our organizational sales activities into a model, let's have it connect the dots and look for hidden patterns and make recommendations to us on exactly what we should do to hit our revenue targets, right? And perhaps it's which sales and marketing activities we should pursue. Or an example that's very close to a lot of our hearts is recommendation engines. If you've spent any time on Amazon, you'd know that based on both your transactional and your browsing behavior, Amazon recommends products to you. And that's their analytical engine working in the background, making decisions on what you might be interested in so that Amazon can score another sale. And if you think this isn't effective, you are underestimating its impact. It's publicly and commonly known that 35% of Amazon's revenue is attributable to its recommendation engine. It's attributable to an advanced prescriptive analysis. And the primary thing that you'll observe as you move up your analytical journey is that your questions also go from being very reactive to a lot more proactive. So addressing potential problems instead of only existing problems. You need to obviously address your existing problems, but you also need to keep potential problems in mind so that they don't become existing problems in the future. And this mind shift, or rather this mindset shift, is a characteristic of data-driven organizations. So in my opinion, there are two technologies that have revolutionized the way that we do business. The first is email, and the second is Excel, and by extension, PowerPoint. When I joined Stacks, I was blown away by the fact that the companies that invest in other companies developing cutting-edge solutions still make many of those investment decisions using PowerPoint and Excel. But the problem is this revolution happened ages ago. And there's been so much advancement since then, but we still seem to be stuck in a very static form of thinking. Excels are point-in-time views of a particular situation. We now have real-time dashboards directly connected to our data sources, so we can monitor performance in real time. We have business intelligence systems, so on top of monitoring performance, we can also run simulations and see what would happen if we change something. And then we have decision automation. And the simplest use case for this is a decision taken routinely and set on a few established rules. So for example, if this happens, then we need to do this. If that happens, or if someone's saying this, then we need to do that. The thing here is, why do you, if the rules are so clear cut, why do you need to make that decision? Or why do you need to wrap that decision up in an email and send it out? A computer can very, very easily lift this burden off you so that you can focus on the more interesting things that require collaboration and require creativity, something that computers are still somewhat struggling to do. Advances in AI are amazing, but computers are thankfully still struggling to collaborate and be as creative as humans are. And with AI and machine learning, you can take decision automation several steps further. So even if you think there's no clear pattern in your decisions, it may just find one for you and be able to make it faster than you. But this isn't to say that you should replace yourself with a machine. This is to say that your time is far more valuable than what the routine and what the mundane demand. and you should have the time to do what executives do best. In fact, I would say, I would go beyond that. I would say you should have the time to do what humans do best: collaborate, problem solve, and be creative. And that's the characteristics of executives in a data-driven organization. So with all that being said, I am going to pass it on to my brilliant colleague, Pasindu, who is going to dive into a practical example of data analytics at Stacks, the incredible work that he championed for a company in the beverages space. Over to you, Pasindu. I have given you control of the screen, I believe.
Yeah, hello. Hope you all are doing great and away from all the chaos that's happening outside. But to start off, it's really interesting what's happening with data. But what most people confuse themselves is that data is actually like not a switch, it's a journey, right? And to get to a place where you can actually do strategy with data, there should be some information that you have to digest before even jumping into some of these problems that businesses have, right? And to start off, there's two areas that we want to focus on: data resources itself and the business requirement, where we want to solve data problems, but at the end of the day, you have to solve business problems using data, right? So that is where it is critical to understand the business requirement even before you look at data resources itself. And the next part of the story is to build a way to look at a business using data. And that could be tricky sometimes because businesses have sub-business units, different business models internally. So how do you look at data using, look at a business using data is what we refer to as an analytical framework. And once you have a way of looking at things using data, it's critical to understand what are the problems that are pressing on the organization's performance, and then try to see what data is available and how can we use it to strategize to solve these problems. And it's really important to scope, especially with data. It's most projects fail mainly because they don't know how to scope data and the business requirement and the problems you have to a place where you can approach it across 40 people organization, right? And so once you scope down the problem, what we solve for is data infrastructure and analytics plan to solve these problems. And then it's critical that we have an implementation strategy. How do you deploy some of the insights you generate from analytics to the organization and capture the organization's feedback? And so this is how we approach a problem, and it has been working for us. So we have been tweaking it and trying to figure out better ways to do things. But to dive deep in, we need to understand a business fundamentally, even to talk about pain points. And most of the time, people talk about business problems without really understanding the business itself. And it's common in organizations as well, because organizations work as business units and that they are generally siloed, right? By data and by communication. And when we go into an organization, we try to understand the business model, the marketing, the operating environment, supply chain, how do they market themselves, and then go into what sort of problems they have in these areas, and then try to understand what sort of economic constraints they have. Is it a demographic constraint, or is it actually a regulatory constraint that will inhibit us from getting to things, right? So that information is captured in our analytical framework, and that will save us a lot of time when we try to solve problems using data, because we fundamentally understand the components of their business using data and it's easier leap to get to solving them when you have a clear understanding. And the next part of the story is the data itself. Like my colleagues mentioned, data can be in all sorts of forms. So in a typical organization, it could have a customer relationship management system, or a supply chain management system, or plethora of other things, including decision support and executive information systems. So how do we integrate this information is critical. But even more, what data is stored in these systems is critical as well, because most of the time that when business units are working in silos, sometimes they don't even know that the other person has some of the information to solve the strategic problem they have. And then also it's critical to understand the market and the macro economy as well. So we can get a sense of what people are talking about, what people like in these brands. And once you assess the data in an organization in different levels, we want to take it through a value creation journey where we take all the data in and try to access all data in the databases. Maybe it's ops, it's ERP or sales, and in even marketing data, including consumer information or social media records. And then once we access that information, we go into investigating them. We, even though superficial or going over all the available data, we try to prioritize what is important here, and then go into a deep dive. Like Randhika mentioned, it's really important to prioritize in this sort of scenario, because we are talking about thousands of tables of data, and half of the data is not really understood by anybody in the organization. So we dive deep into understanding this data and then assessing the quality of it, to even before we get to solve problems. So once we have a map of the whole land, we go into a clear understanding of the quality of the data. And in this scenario, we will run through a particular example where we are trying to help a beverage company try to assess their data and what they can do to strategize around data. So particularly for this company, the report that we generated here is analyzing health of the data, comprehensiveness, and accessibility. And as you can see, there's accuracy, validity, and all sorts of other criteria that we measure health of the data by. And in this particular scenario, what we have come across is all these numbers are by 3, and health and comprehensiveness in this company was incredible. Like compared to the rest of the environment, rest of the market, it was incredible. But the main problem was they had disparate systems, and they could not get their business intelligence function to aggregate all this information and share it with people who actually need this information, or set KPIs to motivate people to achieve the targets they have. And towards that, once we have a clear idea of what the comprehensiveness, health, and accessibility is, we go into representing the organization using data itself. How do you look at a business using data? So in this particular scenario, we take customers, and we look at what can we monitor in a customer, and change in behavior, change in their basket, what sort of products they buy. And then we come up with a set of things that really mean a lot to understand the customer, like location information and their purchase frequency. And once we set up the customer pillar in place, we look at the products themselves. So these are the key components that makes up the business model itself. And then we try to get that represented into data, where we can talk about a big picture solution where everything is at one place. Consumer information, customer information, product information, where we can generate solutions out of this. For this company, we even looked at macroeconomic data and then tried to solve companies' problems using data itself. And then key problems was around understanding customer. What's the actual capacity of a customer? And they had no clear idea about how to even approach it. So we started a conversation where we scoped the problem down and discussed how can we decrease discount spending. And fundamental problem they had was they were incentivizing the market using discounts, mainly because they didn't have the leverage to negotiate with their customer base for a better deal or better profit margins, right? And they had 5 types of discounts that incentivize cash and quantity, and then also they had like overriding discounts to incentivize like more quantity purchase and better inventory management. But the problem was they would introduce targets for a customer, but in actuality they're incentivizing people who can actually buy more. But in reality, their capacity or the baseline of a customer was much higher than the targets they have set. So they were, without effort, making higher and higher discounts. And so using data, we can try to understand how to set targets. And that's exactly what we went to the client with. And there we tried to understand a simplified model of our analytical framework, the representation we did of the business using data to solve a hyper target and solve this problem. So here we are looking at the customer and then focusing on key areas we want to understand. For instance, customer basket, repeat purchase index, the frequency of purchase, or the capacity itself, the baseline, and other factors as well. And then try to relate it to their problem around discounts. And discounts are related to credit period and volume. So it's critical to understand customer in the context of all of these 3 things, and then try to solve it as a third step to get to the volume targets and the client sales force targets that they wanted to set. And the output was, in this scenario, a simple 2-way look, where we wanted to understand by customer how our products performing and how is the customer themselves perform. And we wanted to give a high, like a specific discount, a catered recommendation of what the target should be for the particular customer by product. And all this is dandy, but it's impossible to implement some of these analytics work in an organization. So it's a process again to even roll out a solution, right? So to start off with, generally we follow a 3-step process where we try to implement data infrastructure. For this particular client, data infrastructure was critical because the accessibility to their data was really in a terrible shape. And once we have a single data mart where we could use for analysis and business intelligence, we go into doing the analytics workflow as well. We want to quantify some of the drivers of the business and then figure out how to relate it to the business problems they have, and then actually solve the business problems. So, and once we have a clear idea about how to solve these business problems, we go into an implementation phase. Sometimes data might be a really good indicator of performance and how to go about things, but sometimes data might tell you a false story. For instance, if your customer base has a significant bias, if you're trying to go into, say, digital marketing, like when you try to figure out like the right customer, you might be avoiding some of the customers that might be actually be attracted to this because there was a bias in the initial marketing or how the product was framed. But then you might be guided in a wrong direction when you try to implement things. So it's a feedback process. We need to understand how to implement some of these strategies that we come up with data, and then try to listen to the organization and the customers to see how effective it is. So this is how we approach a problem statement, and this is a good starting point for your organization, mainly because data is complicated. Nobody knows what to do with their data in the internal organization. And there's two types of people. Either you think that you have all the data that is required to ever make a strategic decision, or you think the data is garbage and you can't really use it at all. So we wanted to figure out exactly how the data is, and then solve for business problems using data to actually get to the meat of it, the profits and the revenue that will drive the organization into the future and do all the cool things that they've been doing. Yeah, this is our thoughts about how to approach data. If you have questions, we can open it up. Thank you.
I think we've gotten a few questions. Actually, I'm checking. Yeah, if anyone has questions, please, you can post it on the Q&A box. We'll be around for the next couple of minutes or so. I guess, Rai, you can tell us if we're over time. I think we spoke for quite some time.
Yes, Stefan, I think there's a question around how to integrate unstructured data in organization. Yeah.
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah, I'll take a crack at it and you guys can add to it as well.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the situation, right? And what sort of unstructured data we are talking about. In certain cases, if you are talking about, for example, text data is typically thought of as unstructured data, right? So if you are to get, if you are to download, like let's say, what customers have talked about a certain product from the web, then how do you make meaning out of the data, right? So when you have a specific question like that, I think you need to design a way to get to what you want to get to, right? So you can use simple keywords to identify which reviews talk about prices versus service versus, let's say, competition, right? So in that case, what you're really doing is you're trying to create a sort of like a proxy variable that will basically identify reviews or basically products where a lot of people talked about service related issues, right? Or it could be about products where people had some sort of like a trouble or some situation, right? So if you are interested in that, you are able to sort of do that. But I think it depends on the situation and what you're trying to do with it.
Yeah, I think I distinctly remember our data team working on a project with a client that had sort of a large stock of physical invoices, and they really wanted to analyze it as well. And we consider that unstructured data because, well, it's not stored in your systems. And they realized that it would have taken thousands or maybe tens of thousands of man hours to pull all of that data into their system. And so what we ended up doing was we put together a tool, and it was based on computer vision and on optical character recognition technology, to automatically process a lot of those invoices. And they were in different formats, and then they were in different shapes, and there were a lot of complications with it. But we were able to train the tool to pick the right data points and then insert it into their system. And in addition to handling, because they were still kind of using, they were transitioning between, a manual system and a digital automated system. They were still getting in a large volume of invoices. That tool was continued to be used until they had completed their transition. So that's another way that you can kind of structure your unstructured data. We've got a question. Can a startup company be a data-driven company? And if so, what kind of approaches should be taken initially for the benefit of long-term context, at least?
I can take a crack at it. So now that we're in an environment where there's a lot of data, you type something in to even get your daily narang juice or something, It becomes like a critical problem where why are you not using data, right? We are in an age where everything is connected by data. We are like monitoring things through data. So why would you not orient your business around data is a question, right? Like it's not even about whether we pick data or not. It's fundamental that we develop the infrastructure required to make decisions using data. Else you will be trying to compete with another person who will use data to uh, shove you down the failure wagon, right? And part of the problem that we have noticed is it's really difficult for organizations that are really large to shift to be data driven. But if you're a startup, it's really easy to go in the data route and figure out the infrastructure first, even before you go into some of these deep conversations about how to build a product and what products would we have and all that, right?
And if anything, as a startup, you should be data driven from the start, because that just solves a lot of problems for you down the line. Believe me, we're working with mature companies that have data problems that you can't possibly dream of. They're difficult problems to solve, which is why we're employed. So you want to get the data problem, resolved at the start. The other thing about a startup is you may not be collecting a lot of data at the very beginning, but you are collecting some data. You're collecting data on your customers, you're collecting data on your financials. As a startup, something that's very cost effective is running advertisements on social media, and implementing inbound strategies, in order to get traffic to your website and convert on your website. And you're definitely collecting a lot of data there. Even if you use sort of a no-code tool in order to put your website together, generally a lot of things have analytical modules that kind of come out of the box, and you're collecting data there. And you can use that data to make some really good decisions on, which customers should you be focusing on, what parts of your marketing is working and what parts aren't working. And and then as you grow in size and as you scale up, you'll begin collecting a lot more data, and then you can make better decisions. You can pass that data onto models that, as we said, can make some of those decisions for you as well. I think email marketing automation is a very good example of that. Instead of you sort of getting somebody's email address and then figuring out, okay, what kind of email should I send this person? You can think about, based on this person's segment that they belong to, based on their demographics, based on their interests, and based on the product that they've just purchased from me, this is the kind of email that needs to go out to this person, right? And once again, that's a decision that's being automated for you.
Yeah, I think what's important is, without thinking about the technology, it's really important to emphasize it's a mind shift change, right? You need to be able to monitor and measure business activity. You need to figure it out. You're already doing it for financial stuff, right? But how do you measure customer success? How do you measure delivery success? What is the time between getting an order and delivering an order? So you have to think about all of those things, right? And if you are to implement, this is not just for startups, right? For any company. If you think about measuring something, then you can use that data to really think about how to optimize it further when you combine it with other data points as well.
So we've got quite a few more questions. We have a lot of questions on sort of breaking into the data analytics and data science fields. But you know what, Rai, I'll let you tell us if we have time or not. We could go on.
So actually, we can actually go on for maybe another 5 or 6 minutes. So what I thought we'd do is, maybe there were 3 or 4 questions regarding breaking into the data analytics space, as you said. So let's club those together and take them as one question. And if you could maybe share your thoughts on that, and I'll go through the rest of the questions in the meantime, and we'll try to club them and take them all at once. So off you go.
Sure. So I think the popular question over here is, people are doing undergraduate programs in AI and in data science, and they want to know what are the job opportunities like? What are the specific skills that they need in order to work as a data scientist, in order to break into the data science space? Pasindo, I know you're highly opinionated here, so I'll hand this over to you.
Yeah. Yeah, so getting into data science is actually
Easy,
glamorous, and
easy.
for in most people say heads, it's like going into like a soccer field and becoming Neymar overnight. But actually, in actuality, there's a lot of different ways to get into data science, right? So there's a tech and DevOps and data engineering side to all of these questions, like how do you bring all of these data together and integrate them is a critical question that needs answers, right? So that's one way to get into the business, and that will take you on a more technical route. But there's another side where you can work as a business analyst, trying to understand some of the requirements of a business and go backwards into solving analytics. But the critical part is you have to have a fundamental understanding about basic mathematics, statistics, and computer science to be even good at the business side of the story as well. But data scientists are generally experienced people, right? They have industry experience, they have computer science and like statistics experience as well. So it's just not learning a machine learning model is hardly will get you through the door. There's some sort of context that you require to get to be at a level where you can solve problems as a data scientist, right? So prepare for it. And I think the easiest way to get from undergrad is the two parts I mentioned: either go into a data analyst, business analyst role, or else go into the engineering side of the story, and then try to work your gamut, so you expand into the business to the technology side, or from technology to the business side. Yeah.
I'm going to touch on kind of one soft skill that I think is absolutely important. Like so many people talk about it as well. I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but especially when it comes to data, you're often dealing with complicated concepts that you might understand, but a lot of people around you may not understand, especially whoever you're trying to convince, be it your manager or your senior leadership or even the customer. So I think it's really also important to work on your communication skills and become a very good communicator who can kind of translate a lot of technical things into layman terms. And if you can do that, and you have that skill, and you also have sort of the mathematical, the computer science background, you can be unstoppable.
Yeah. But at the same time, I don't think you necessarily need all of those at the beginning, right? I come
Yeah.
from a very business economic background.
For sure.
Jaro comes from an economics background as well. So I think you need to be curious. You need to really have that in your DNA, right? Wanting to needing the need to know more, right? Understand patterns and whatnot. But at the same time, I think learning about data, learning about machine learning is a lot easier now than how it used to be 5 years ago. There's a lot of resources, free resources that you can use to really understand the concepts behind it. So if you have the interest, if you have the need to spend a little bit of time going into this whole thing, I think you should be able to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a just question. 3 more questions which I flagged for live answers, and we can go ahead and take those questions. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the questions that we'll be taking. If there's anything more that's like kind of you feel important that you need to ask, please go ahead and send it in, or even email it in to us, and I will share it with the gentlemen on the panel, and I'm sure that they'll be happy to give you the answer. But for the moment, we're taking only these last 3 questions. So Stefan, I'll hand it back over to you to take them on.
Yeah, sure. There's a question on how do we build trust in using cloud-based technologies, even something as simple as cloud storage, which is negatively viewed at the moment, citing security concerns. Somebody has been reading about Apple's recent cloud issues.
So I think Pasindo can possibly talk about the technical aspect of it. But again, I think it's really about who you talk to in a business, right? If you talk to the IT guy, they're super scared of everything, right? I mean, you have to pay it's a risky world, right? There are pros and cons of everything, right? I think if you can be smart about sort of desensitizing your data and using the sort of the right cloud solution, in most cases, I think your data will be secure.
Yeah, I think so. I think we are currently sort of like having the same discussion with a client. In fact, we just had it like 2 hours ago
2
on
hours ago.
cloud storage, and we managed to finally convince IT to go for cloud storage. And there are very secure cloud storage options. They tend to be a little bit more expensive, but i- in our experience, for example, if you take Azure Cloud, you have something called Azure Government Cloud, right? And Government Cloud kind of ensures that it has mechanisms, it has protocols in place to ensure that your sensitive data is highly secure, and nobody who shouldn't be accessing that data or can't access that data accesses the data. So there are technical solutions in place to ensure a high degree of security as well. There's a question on how do we approach predictive sales analytics as a first step. And I think this is also related to the next question, which is more on, we're doing descriptive and diagnostic analysis right now. How do we move on to predictive analyses? What are the possible tools and practices that do not require big investment? How do we show the potential of these analyses to management so it will be an investment for the future?
You take this.
I can go.
Go for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's all you, man.
So the fundamental problem that I have generally is most organizations wants to understand descriptive and diagnostic work, and then when they think about predictive, they don't really understand that involves like what their future plan is, right? Like most organizations doesn't think ahead of a year, a fiscal year, or a financial year. So that should be accounted even to talk about predictive analytics. And then the other part of the story is it's not good enough to just understand, okay, here are my numbers, but you have to look at your business through data, right? And then you can talk about, in this particular demographic, this is my performance over time. And then I can be like, hey, this might be increasing, but it's cannibalizing on something else. So how should I adjust the forecast or the predictive future, right? So it's critical to understand what exactly your organization is through the eyes of data, and then try to refine it to get to a solution where you can look into the strategic future of your organization. But to answer your question about getting into predictive, it's all about figuring out what is important, right? Like time series data is really important to be forecasted into the future, or what your customers' preferred products going to be is a good predictive use case as well. And there's so many others, these use cases that you can pick and choose from. But to get there, you have to understand what the future is strategically for you, and then try to understand how can you look at your whole organization using data, right?
I think just to kind of build on that, you can think of predictive as, at the end of the day, it's either you or the machine that's making assumptions about the future, right? And let's say you're doing this, and you can sort of figure out how to delegate it to a machine later, but let's start with you doing it. How would you approach it? You'd approach it by starting with a simple Excel model. You'd approach it by starting with, your historical data, and then putting down all of your assumptions on how you feel the market will change, how you feel the customers are responding to, your marketing campaigns, and then kind of marry your historical data with your assumptions in order to predict, okay, I think this is what my revenue is going to look like in the future. And that's at a very kind of simple level, right? And then you can obviously, when you get kind of buy-in at that level from leadership, and leadership says, a lot of these assumptions make sense. And you know what, you ran this model for us like 1 quarter ago, and the actual values were very close to, the values that you forecasted. You can use that as a win in order to kind of convince them that, okay, if you think this model is great and it's only on Excel, let's invest in some predictive technologies, which can actually take like a lot of variables from other places and make much better decisions. Let's invest in prescriptive technologies that can, where we can ask the data what we should do, right? And I think it's starting at kind of if leadership is currently telling you, we don't believe in this, and we don't have the budget to invest in this, and you're an individual that's kind of trying to make a change in your company, start off small, start off with what you can control, and then show them your early wins, and then use that to convince them that an investment is necessary.
One of the things that I want to add to that is like you can start however you want, but you need to, if you want to be serious about it, right? Even Excel model, you need to sort of think about a mechanism of how your forecast or your prediction can get better over time, right? So whatever the actual sales, that has to sort of feed into your model in some sense, right? If you are to say that, okay, the first time I'm predicting something, I'm getting a 25% variance, right? So how do I go about predicting the next month, right? So ideally, you should be able to figure out a way to reduce that variance from 25% to 20% in the next month, right? So everyone does predictions, right? All companies are doing predictions in terms of budgeting for the next year and so on. But a good prediction model has that component built in, right? So it learns from its mistakes and it gets better over time.
Yep. I think we're like 20 minutes over time.
Cool.
And there's 69 people still here. So really thankful that you guys came back and listen to us.
Yeah.
Right. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Data is maybe not as scary as we think it is. And maybe based on what these three gentlemen here shared with us, data can and actually should be our best friend. Data analytics for exponential growth. Thank you, Randika, Stefan, and Pasindu for your insightful and informative presentation and the answers provided to the questions. Of course, to all our participants on Zoom, our viewers on YouTube and Facebook, thank you for your participation. A reminder, as always, to subscribe, click the alert button, and of course, share the YouTube video, which is what will assist us to continue bringing AmCham's diverse, immediately impactful online resources to you free of charge. As we conclude, a reminder from our panelists, the AmCham team, and myself. Let's keep our physical distance, masks on, hand sanitized, immunity boosted, fingers crossed, and spirits up. Stay safe, everybody. Good night, and God bless.
Thank you, Rai, and thank you to AmCham.
Thanks for having us.